An old handcart sat in the corner of a playground in Gyeonggi Province, South Korea, ignored for years. Kids played beside it, parents walked past it, but no one gave it a second thought. Until one summer afternoon in 2011, when a guard opened a cooler inside that cart and found a dismembered body. Who was she? Who left her there? And how did no one notice? This is the story of a murder hidden in plain sight. This is the Ansan handcart murder case. So my friend flew in from Korea to visit me here in Malaysia, and like a lot of travelers, he bought some random eSIM online. It looked cheap, so he went for it. But the moment he landed and tried to book a Grab, the internet cut out. The app froze, the driver left, and this happened again and again. He was so stressed. No maps, no way to message, nothing was working. And I was like, why are you doing this to yourself? So I introduced him to Saily. We downloaded the app, picked Malaysia, selected the 5 GB plan, and added my promo code DARKASIA for a 15% discount. It took like 2 minutes. And just like that, everything worked. Fast internet, no dropouts, and no drama. He was so shocked at how easy it was. And honestly, my travels have completely changed since I started using Saily. No more airport SIM lines, no more roaming fees, and no more worrying about losing connection in a new country. Once you install Saily's eSIM, you're good to go, regionally or globally. Their plans are super affordable and topping up is fast. They even notify you before your data runs out. If you travel often, or even just once, you need this app. Seriously, it's the best out there. Download the Saily app right now or scan the QR code on screen and use my code DARKASIA for 15% off your plan. Stay connected, travel stress-free, and never get stranded again. July 6, 2011, in the heart of Chojidong, Danwon-gu, Ansan, South Korea, a quiet apartment complex with a familiar playground. It was the kind of place where children played freely and neighbors passed by without a second thought. That day was no different. Kids were running around, playing like they always did. But then one of the parents noticed something, an old handcart left near the playground. It had been sitting there for a long time, and she thought it was dangerous. Her concern was simple. A child had bumped into it and gotten hurt, so she asked the apartment security office to remove it. That one small complaint, something that might have been brushed off on any other day, ended up uncovering something unthinkable. So, what exactly happened? The cart had become part of the scenery. It had been sitting there for so long that no one really noticed it anymore. For nearly 3 years, it had been abandoned. No one knew where it came from. No one seemed to care, until that one parent spoke up. Even the apartment guards had no idea who had left it there or when. Still, one of the security guards, Mr. Kim, decided it was time to deal with it himself. He walked over, ready to clean it out. As he began moving things around, he came across a large, heavy ice box loaded onto the cart. At first, he assumed it was just trash, maybe someone's leftover belongings. But when he opened it, he found layers upon layers of plastic, soaked in a dark liquid. It gave off a foul stench so strong that it made him gag. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Still, determined to finish the job, Mr. Kim kept going. He removed the plastic one layer at a time, and underneath it all, he found a large travel suitcase. When he unzipped it, he froze. Inside were human body parts, a leg, severely decomposed remains packed tightly inside. What had seemed like an eyesore at the edge of a playground turned out to be the hiding place of a horrifying secret. It was around 3:10 in the afternoon. Mr. Kim, shocked by what he had just discovered, immediately called the police. Officers arrived at the scene shortly after. But even they were taken aback. The sight inside the suitcase was something no one was prepared for. The police began examining the remains right away, and slowly, the outline of a horrifying crime began to emerge. The body had been decapitated, both thumbs were missing, and the level of decomposition was so severe, so much so that the only thing they could tell for sure was that the victim was a woman. It was clear this wasn't something they could solve through conventional means. Scientific analysis would be crucial. They sent the remains to the National Forensic Service for an autopsy. It was the only way to get answers. The body was too decomposed for visual identification, and there was no ID, no belongings, no face left to recognize. But science still had something to work with. Among the dismembered remains, a few fingers were relatively intact. Forensic technicians carefully examined what little was left, lifting what they could from the decaying skin. From just 3 partial fingerprints, they found a match. The victim was identified. Her name has never been publicly released, only her surname, Mrs. Pak. Born in 1968, she was 44 years old. And she hadn't been some nameless drifter. She had lived in that very apartment complex, walking the same paths, using the same elevators, passing by the same neighbors who, for years, would never know what became of her. Mrs. Pak had a physical disability in her left arm and was registered as a level 4 cerebral palsy patient under the National Disability System. She didn't work. She survived on basic social welfare and a monthly disability stipend, just enough to scrape by. To some, she might have been invisible, a quiet, solitary woman trying to live a quiet, solitary life. She had few social connections, no job to clock into, no strong support network to notice when she went missing. And that was part of the tragedy. No one filed a missing person report. No one rang the alarm when she stopped showing up, not even when her apartment remained unvisited. She simply vanished. Mrs. Pak had disappeared without a trace back on March 31st, 2006, over 5 years before the discovery. It wasn't until her remains were found in the most unimaginable way, folded inside an old suitcase, which was inside an icebox, in a handcart, under layers of plastic, that anyone realized she was gone. During the investigation, they found no useful phone records, no hospital visits, no reports from friends or family that could clearly explain when or how she had gone missing, or even when she might have died. Her life had simply gone quiet, and now, years later, her body had surfaced in the most chilling way. The first possibility investigators considered was Mrs. Pak's ex-husband. After news of the case broke, his name quickly surfaced as a potential suspect. According to people who knew Mrs. Pak, she had suffered greatly during her marriage. They described years of domestic violence, not just physical abuse, but emotional and financial control as well. The couple had officially divorced in May 2005. Afterward, Mrs. Pak changed her registered address and moved to Siheung, Gyeonggi Province. It seemed like she had finally cut ties with him for good. What complicated the suspicion, though, was her ex-husband's current life. He had reportedly been doing volunteer work at a welfare foundation in Gangwon Province. He was also caring for their 17-year-old son, who was diagnosed with autism. That raised a question. Would someone in his position really come back years later to kill his ex-wife? Digging deeper, there were no known records of criminal violence or any behavior that would suggest a clear motive for murder. The police did initially consider him a person of interest, but later ruled him out due to lack of evidence. No strong connections, no hard proof. Still, some weren't convinced. They argued that domestic violence is often hidden, that there may have been resentment or threats that never surfaced. Others speculated that his outward image as a kind, helpful man might have been a facade, and that he could have continued threatening her in private. But again, in the official investigation, no concrete link was ever found. So, as it stands, the ex-husband theory remains just that, a theory, nothing more. The second possibility is that the killer was an unknown third party, someone completely unrelated to Mrs. Park's immediate circle. In other words, it might not have been someone close to her at all. A random perpetrator, a stranger, still remains a very real possibility. Mrs. Park lived on the margins of society. She survived on disability payments and basic welfare support with little to no safety net. She could have easily become a target, vulnerable, isolated, and unnoticed. After all, she had been missing since 2006. This raises haunting questions. Was she on the run from someone? Was she being chased? Or did she live briefly with someone new, only for things to go terribly wrong? It's possible that after the murder, the killer used the handcart, maybe one they stumbled across by chance, or maybe they knew exactly where it was and dumped the body there in a hurry, hoping no one would notice. And in that scenario, the idea that someone in the apartment complex might have helped, or at least turned a blind eye, can't be completely ruled out. Whoever did it seemed to know that the handcart had been sitting there for years without anyone touching it. They may have been familiar with the apartment layout, possibly even someone living in the same community. And then comes the third possibility, the most unsettling one of all, Mr. Chong. He was the owner of this handcart and the most likely suspect. When police learned the cart had been sitting at the playground for nearly 3 years, their immediate priority was to track down whoever it belonged to. Eventually, they identified him, a man named Chong, 66 years old. The connection between Chong and Mrs. Park raised more questions than answers. Chong wasn't just any ordinary man. He had a past, one steeped in blood. Years earlier, he had been convicted of murder. The court had sentenced him to death, a punishment reserved for the most brutal of crimes in South Korea. But somehow, Chong avoided the news. He was labeled a model prisoner, the kind of inmate who attended chapel, obeyed the rules, and kept his head down. Eventually, his sentence was reduced, and he walked free. And when he did, he seemed reborn. He immersed himself in Christian outreach, even founded a ministry for people with disabilities. To outsiders, he was a man redeemed, quietly tending to the forgotten, the neglected. He led Bible studies. He prayed with the vulnerable. People started calling him a good man. But behind that gentle image, things weren't so clean. If you look closer, the cracks in his story began to show. He told people he had killed his wife in a fit of rage after discovering she had cheated on him, as if that explained everything. But that wasn't true. Court records revealed that his victim had actually been his mistress. He also claimed to be a dentist, confident, polished, educated. But no one could ever find a license, a diploma, or even a trace of formal medical training. It was all smoke. And then there was his connection to Mrs. Park. At some point, Chong began collecting her monthly disability allowance, about 400,000 won, supposedly on her behalf. It's unclear when or how this started. What is clear is that such an arrangement would require either legal guardianship or very deep trust. Chong had neither. Even more suspicious, there were records showing he had helped facilitate her move into the same apartment complex where he lived. On paper, it looked like he was helping her. But was he? What if all that kindness was just a mask? What if he lured her in under the pretense of offering care and used her for money, control, perhaps even companionship until she became inconvenient? And what if, when she resisted, she disappeared? The problem was, investigators couldn't dig any deeper into the man who looked more and more like the key to the entire case, because by the time they identified him, Chong was already dead. He had died of cancer in late 2009, and with him, perhaps, died the only real chance at understanding what truly happened to Mrs. Park. With him no longer alive, questioning or charging him became impossible. Could Chong have killed her? It's possible. If Mrs. Pak was murdered before his death in late 2009, yes. But if her death came after, then someone else was responsible, and that's the part no one can answer. The autopsy couldn't narrow down an exact time of death. All it revealed was that the body had been decomposing for at least 6 months. Not a year, not 5, just a vague threshold. Enough to confirm she'd been dead for a long time, but not long enough to know when. That uncertainty leaves everything on edge. And the location, it didn't make sense because Mrs. Pak's body wasn't buried deep in the woods or dumped in a river. It was left in a handcart in the middle of an apartment complex playground, a space where children played, parents gathered, and people passed by every day. So why hide a body there? Unless someone was counting on the fact that no one would look. That, in a place so ordinary, so familiar, no one would think to question what had always been there. Another obstacle, there were no security cameras near the playground, no footage of who left the cart there. Today, it's rare to find a playground without CCTV. But back in 2008, it wasn't the norm. All those blind spots allowed something or someone to vanish. Some residents claimed they'd seen the cart as early as 2008. Others said it appeared in 2009, but no one could agree on the exact time. And if Chong was the killer, why would he choose a place so exposed? Why risk discovery by dumping a body in his own apartment complex? And more baffling still, why use his own cart? Anyone who saw it, who recognized it, could have traced it back to him. It wasn't some anonymous trash heap or public bin. It was his, familiar to the security guards, to neighbors, to the very community where he lived. If the goal was to hide a crime, it was an illogical move. Was it recklessness or confidence that because of who the victim was, disabled, poor, socially invisible, her disappearance would go unnoticed? Either way, the choice of location, the use of his own cart, and the fact that it remained untouched for years all point not just to a brutal crime, but to a chilling calculation. And with Chong gone, the investigation hit a wall. There were no signs of accomplices, no useful witnesses, no one close to Mrs. Pak who could offer answers. And so, over time, the case faded. No resolution. Just a forgotten woman in a forgotten cart in the middle of a place that should have been the safest of all. So what was discovered in July 2011 remains to this day an unsolved mystery. Several television programs, journalists, and investigators tried to uncover the truth. None could, especially since the key suspect was already gone. And the victim, Mrs. Pak, was a vulnerable woman, disabled, struggling financially, living without a support system. No one asked questions. No one asked why she was left in pieces, hidden in plain sight for years, and no one realized. It's heartbreaking. So, what do you think really happened? Was Mrs. Pak killed by the very man who claimed to care for her, a convicted murderer hiding behind a mask of faith and charity? Or was her death the work of someone else entirely, a stranger who took advantage of her isolation and left no trace behind? Was her body hidden in plain sight out of recklessness or because someone knew no one would ever look? In the end, we may never know who killed her. Too much time has passed, and the key suspect is dead. And the silence surrounding Mrs. Pak's life and death remains deafening. But maybe that's the real tragedy here, a tragedy shaped not only by violence, but by silence, by neglect, by a society that failed to see her, even when she was right there. Some say this case reveals something darker than just murder. It shows us how easy it is for someone to disappear in a crowded city. How even in a place filled with people, a body can be hidden for years without suspicion. No one cared. And that is perhaps the most chilling part of this case. So let me know what you think in the comments. Could this have been solved, or was it doomed to be forgotten from the very start? That is all for today. Thanks for watching.